we have one more deck, people. I know you're getting tired of hearing me talk, but I hope the images are so pretty. They are enticing. The final deck is the Ebony Tarot. I'd say that this is probably the newest deck. Um, the Ebony Tarot is by Lisa Sevigny, and I'll share a little bit about it as I flip through. Here's the back. This is a delightful matte linen. Oh, so beautiful. The edging is this lovely blush pink. It's very new to me. And I really like it. I really like it. So here is information about the deck. The artist, Lisa Sevigny, is from Montreal, and the deck is staged in natural settings of the region. And all of the models are, according to the photographer, the artist, Afro-descended artists. So in other words, these are all people who are Afro-descendant in ethnicity and are fellow artists. The guidebook, the cards themselves, all of it, the box, is bilingual, French and English, which reflects the region itself, a bilingual region. I find the deck, I think this card is so beautiful. This is one of the cards that made me get this. My birthday was last week, and this was my gift to myself. And this card is one of the reasons it was my gift to myself. Now, the artist frames this deck as a melanated RWS alternative that is great for beginners, among other things. So, if you like or want to learn tarot in the Rider-Waite-Smith framework, but you don't like that art, or you like this art better, right? You like that, but this is more to your taste. And or if you like the idea of a deck comprised of Afro-descended people, so people with brown skin, in the African diaspora, this is a deck that's good for you. All true things, right? These are images that are pretty loyal to the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, and they are also images that are comprised of models who are Afro-descended, brown-skinned folks. And if that's what you're looking for, this does that and does it beautifully, right? All on lovely cardstock. But I would say that this deck, there's a little bit of nudity, folks. It's not gratuitous in my opinion, but do know there's a little bit of nudity. It is overly modest to suggest that the power of this deck is confined to being a good RWS alternative that's melanated. I think this deck is far more than that. In other words, if you can have a melanated Rider-Waite-Smith deck of another kind, and still this deck does something different, in my opinion, beyond its utility to beginners or its use as a good alternative to that art. As you see, there's a kind of delicious suspension of time here, a timelessness to these images. So whereas the Lost Tarot got lost between the medieval ages and here, and now here it's found again, but all the images are from medieval times, this deck has costuming and settings that are dislocated from an insistent present. I'm not seeing like my apartment building here, right? I live in a house, but like when I lived in Chicago, I'm not seeing any high rises here. I'm not seeing any cars. There is a resistance to idiosyncrasies of the present. And yet, the choices here around clothing and other style and design choices, hairstyles in some cases, other expressions of gender and flexibility and power and all of that stuff, that is certainly not of a medieval tradition and framework. We see those appearances here, right? So the ambiguity of setting, of time and place. Like this dress could be like from United Colors of Benetton or like made by, a seamstress in like the 17th century. I don't know. There is a real refusal to commit to an era, and I love that. That's beautiful, right? There's something so powerful about the flexibility of these images. Also, the Child Inside Tarot, like let's talk about models for a minute and casting. The Child Inside Tarot was also a mono-ethnic deck. Those were all indigenous Guatemalan children. Um, and it has a very particular story of its creation, that it was created in collaboration with this very specific group. Um, and it also is created for a very specific purpose, for engaging our child selves. This deck is meant to be tarot in all its incarnated tools. So it is representative enough, um, broad enough that it can conceivably do anything that tarot can do, generally speaking, right? Like divination work, meditation work. Of course, you can do that with the child inside, but that's not really why it was made, right? This, like the creator says, is an alternative for the RWS beginner, right? Like this deck can do what tarot can do. And so the choice to, and it was filmed, photographed in a place where the artist had to make very deliberate efforts to find a broad swath of Afro descended models, right? Montreal is not teeming, from what I know, with um, Black artists who are looking to model for tarot decks. This took a concerted effort beyond what a tarot creation experience would be if we were in a confined Indigenous group making something in collaboration. This creator had to make an affirmative and intentional effort to cast from a broad cross section of people in a region and find folks who fit her intention, her representative goals, what she wanted to do in keeping this deck melanated. Um, and that is interesting to me. I used to be a union organizer 100 years ago. And I remember talking to a community of low income folks who were workers trying to make a living wage and not making a living wage, and talking to them about the concept of bread and roses. So, getting tired of hearing activists talk to them, these folks sort of expressing that they were tired of activists insisting on a limiting account of the importance of economic justice to the exclusion of the importance of beauty, also. So, like, these are people who want bread and roses too. They want beauty and justice, economic justice too. I sometimes notice that tarot decks that are created within aesthetic politics, deeply committed to justice and representational justice, making sure that there is parity in the stories we see told in the pictures, that sometimes it feels as if there is I'm going to be careful in how I say this, less room for roses. That is not to say that there is anything missing. You know, I think that like the primary judgment of a deck, in my opinion, is what was the creator's goal and did they accomplish that goal? Like, not did they accomplish my preferred goal, right? So, um, lots of these decks are accomplishing exactly what they want to accomplish, and that's perfect. That's beautiful. That is the fullness of that journey. I think that the goal of this creator was constructed in a way that balanced her desire to create a melanated deck with all of the stylistic and aesthetic and esoteric concerns of crafting a tarot deck, that those were of equal importance and balance in her photographic approach. I love how she executed that. And that is a goal and an aesthetic politics that resonated with me and resonates with me. Um, I feel present in these images. Like I have my bread and roses too. That's why I told that little anecdote. That was such a powerful moment for, like, you know, 20-year-old me who knew how to fight the good fight, and someone explaining to me, like, hey, you idiot, who cares so much about justice? We care about justice too, but justice includes beauty and art. Like, you know, the stuff that makes life gorgeous, that has to coexist. This recalls my stupid, smugly, politically, advanced 20-year-old self. Maybe I'm just reflecting on that because it was just my birthday. I'm older than 20 people. um, but this deck, I'm so glad to experience this deck. I think it's really special and gorgeous, and unlike other melanated decks I have or have seen. Um, you know, it is not necessary, and it's grown less important to me over time, frankly, that I quote see myself in the cards. It used to not bother me as being offensive, but it used to feel my absence if there weren't people who could possibly represent the literal me anywhere in a deck. Um, I care about that less. Now it just bothers me less. Um, for whatever reason. Maybe I'm tired of looking at myself in a mirror so I could do without seeing myself. But I think I'm more comfortable with the notion of archetype and more indifferent to the presence or absence of my specificity, my identified specificity. And I think some of that actually probably came along with my increased work with pip decks, and my sometimes preference for pip decks. So yeah, so that all goes to say, I think there's one point at which it would have felt really affirming and important to me to have that deck in hand, the Ebony Tarot, just to feel seen. And there are other people who I'm sure share the sentiment that I used to feel so keenly. That made me a little tender sometimes. Maybe some of that was connected to wounds that I hadn't fully engaged. So while I don't need it to satisfy that need, like I don't feel the pain of erasure if I'm not necessarily visible in a tarot deck, it's still nice to see myself textured all over a deck, and not just superficially, right? There are lots of decks with folks with brown skin of all shapes and sizes and ages, right? This particular deck and the kinds of clothes these folks are wearing, and their gender presentations, and their modernity or sort of like amorphous, opaque timelessness, all of that, I feel so aligned with. Some of my ideal self. So, like, that's the land I wish I lived in and looked like. And some literal, right? Like, I could wear lots of those clothes happily. And some of those clothes I would wear and people wouldn't feel like they were that different than the clothes I wear otherwise. So, they probably look more expensive than the clothes I wear. So, in any case, those are all of the decks, folks. That is the Mountain Dream Tarot, the Child Inside Tarot, the Lost Tarot, the Somnia Tarot, and the Ebony Tarot. I hope that this exploration of the genre of photographic tarot decks has provided some different ideas or questions, some depth, fostered some like thinking about genre as it exists within your own collections, and how realism is or isn't important to you, how medium, photography, or otherwise can function as a part of practice in art, how art history is or isn't represented in your collections and how you want it to be. I'm shuffling without saying. Our question